There are moments in history when the silence of the world becomes louder than its words, and today we break that silence. My friends, we gather not to point fingers, but to raise questions that demand answers. We gather not to incite division, but to ignite thought, and we gather not as adversaries of the West, but as witnesses to a rising truth that the sun, once set in the east, is now beginning to rise again. The world watches, with wonder, with worry, and yes, with fear, as India rises, not with weapons, but with wisdom, not in conquest, but in contribution, not with arrogance, but with ambition rooted in history, hope, and humanity. Why is the West terrified of India's growth in 2025? Why does a voice as iconic as Oprah Winfrey feel compelled to speak boldly and perhaps shockingly on this matter? Today, we explore not only the economic power of a nation reborn, but the awakening of a civilization that has given the world its deepest philosophies, its greatest mathematicians, and now, perhaps, its next global leaders. Let us begin, not in anger, but in truth. Let us speak, not to divide, but to awaken. And let us remember the rise of one nation should never be the fear of another, but the inspiration of all. India's economic trajectory in 2025 is not just a matter of national pride, it is a seismic shift in the global power balance. For decades, Western nations have maintained dominance over the world's financial systems, trade networks, and economic policies. This dominance wasn't accidental, it was built on centuries of colonization, control of global institutions, and influence over developing nations. But now, as India rises with unmatched speed and determination, that old balance is beginning to crumble. The West, used to dictating the terms of the global economy, is facing a new player that no longer needs permission to succeed. India is not asking to join the table, it is building its own. In 2025, India's growth is no longer potential, it is performance. With a GDP expanding at one of the fastest rates in the world, a booming middle class, and a massive youth population driving innovation and consumption, India is transforming from a service-based economy to a global manufacturing and tech powerhouse. Initiatives like Make in India, Digital India, and a wave of startup unicorns are placing India at the forefront of global economic conversation. Indian companies are no longer just outsourcing partners, they are competitors, creators, and global leaders. The West is beginning to recognize that India is not just growing, it is competing, and that is where fear creeps in. India's rise is not coming through Western charity, debt traps, or dependency, it is homegrown, fueled by self-reliance, bold reforms, and a clear vision. This kind of success challenges the long-standing narrative that economic progress in the global South must be guided by Western hands. India is proving that development can be indigenous, ethical, and sovereign. And that truth is unsettling to a world order that has long believed in its monopoly on excellence. What makes India's rise even more formidable is its scale. A nation of over 4 billion people becoming economically independent and globally assertive sends ripples across every boardroom, trading floor, and think tank in the West. Every sector, from defense to digital finance, is watching India's ascent with a mix of awe and anxiety. The fear is not just about losing market share, it's about losing the ability to set the rules. India's voice in global forums is growing louder, and its decisions increasingly shape the future of international trade, climate policy, and digital governance. This fear is not rooted in hostility, but in the realization that the old world order is fading. A new one is emerging, and India is at its center. The West sees this, and while many celebrate it, others brace themselves. Because a confident, capable, and economically powerful India doesn't just change statistics, it changes the story. India's technological evolution is rewriting the rules of global innovation. No longer confined to the role of a service provider or a back-office hub, India is stepping into a bold new era, one where it leads the world in digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, fintech, and space technology. In 2025, this shift is not theoretical, it is happening in real time. From UPI revolutionizing digital payments to ISRO launching landmark missions, India is proving that it can not only keep pace with the world's leading tech powers, but in many ways set the pace. This rapid ascent is causing quiet discomfort in parts of the West that once considered technological leadership their exclusive domain. The foundation of India's tech dominance lies in its ability to scale innovation for a massive and diverse population. While many Western nations build for the few, India is building for the billions and doing it faster, cheaper, and often better. Its unique challenges have birthed ingenious solutions: mobile banking for the unbanked, affordable smartphones for rural areas, telemedicine for remote communities, and online education platforms reaching millions. These innovations aren't just serving India, they are setting a precedent for how technology can empower the global South, and that in itself is a disruption to the Western narrative of innovation as something born only in Silicon Valley or European labs. India's digital public infrastructure is particularly revolutionary. Systems like Aadhaar, UPI, and CoWIN have shown how governments can leverage technology for inclusive governance and citizen empowerment. These platforms are not only admired globally, but are being studied and even replicated. The West, accustomed to fragmented and often inaccessible digital systems, is seeing something different in India, a model of tech-led transformation that is open source, affordable, and democratic. It raises an uncomfortable question for many. If India can do it, why can't we? That question challenges the myth of Western technological supremacy. India's youth play a central role in this shift. With the world's largest population of young, digitally native citizens, India is a breeding ground for entrepreneurship and innovation. Thousands of startups are emerging not just in major cities, but in Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns. These are not imitations of Western ideas, they are rooted in Indian realities and solving Indian problems with global relevance. Investors from around the world are flocking to tap into this energy, but at the same time, governments and corporations in the West are growing wary of India becoming not just a market, but a rival. Beyond software, India is making bold moves in hardware and space. Semiconductors, defense tech, electric vehicles, and indigenous space missions, these are no longer ambitions, but realities being executed with precision. Chandrayaan-3 landing on the Moon's South Pole, or the launch of 5G services entirely designed in India, are not just headlines, they are milestones that showcase capability and vision. For the West, which often perceived India as a junior partner in technology, this is an awakening. India is no longer following the trend, it is setting it. The technological rise of India in 2025 is a message to the world: innovation is not owned, it is earned. And as India earns its place through hard work, talent, and relentless ambition, the traditional centers of tech power must come to terms with a new truth: the future of technology is not only Western. It is also Indian. The global geopolitical landscape is undergoing a quiet revolution, and India is at the heart of it. For much of the modern era, international power dynamics have been shaped and dominated by Western alliances, institutions, and ideologies. From NATO to the G7, from the United Nations Security Council to the World Bank and IMF, Western countries have long held the reins of influence. But today, a new reality is taking shape, one where India is no longer on the sidelines, but increasingly shaping the rules of the game. In 2025, this shift is more visible than ever. India is not just rising economically, it is asserting itself politically and diplomatically on the global stage, and the implications of this are causing concern in long-established power centers. India's foreign policy is evolving from non-alignment to multi-alignment. It is engaging with the United States and the European Union while simultaneously strengthening its ties with Russia, building economic bridges with the Middle East, and playing a crucial role in forums like BRICS, the Quad, and the G20. This ability to navigate multiple spheres of influence without being tied to any single power bloc is giving India a unique strategic edge. It is positioning itself as a balancing force in a world increasingly divided between the U.S.-led West and China's rising influence. The West, used to commanding loyalty through alliances, is now seeing a confident India that makes decisions based on national interest, not ideological alignment. One of the most telling signs of India's rising geopolitical clout is its role in global crisis management. From mediating during regional conflicts to supplying vaccines and humanitarian aid during pandemics, India is acting not just as a participant, but as a responsible global player. Its voice is becoming louder in climate negotiations, global trade debates, and technology governance. India is no longer content with symbolic participation. It seeks real representation. The push for a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, greater voting power in international financial institutions, and leadership in Global South coalitions are not mere aspirations, they are demands backed by economic strength, diplomatic consistency, and growing international respect. Another major factor contributing to this geopolitical shift is India's strategic geography. Nestled between East and West, bordering major powers like China and Pakistan, and flanked by critical sea routes in the Indian Ocean, India's location gives it immense leverage in global security dynamics. The Indo-Pacific, once a vague term in diplomatic circles, is now the center of global strategy, and India is its anchor. Its growing military capabilities, strategic partnerships, and maritime influence are reshaping the balance of power in the region. As China grows more assertive and the U.S. recalibrates its global commitments, India's stability, democracy, and strategic clarity are making it an indispensable player. What unsettles many in the West is that India is not simply aligning itself with the existing global order, it is challenging it. India advocates for a more equitable and multipolar world where power is not concentrated but distributed. It is championing reforms in global institutions that no longer reflect the realities of today's world. While Western nations often speak of equality and inclusion, India is demanding it and backing those demands with action, alliances, and alternative frameworks. This is a challenge to Western hegemony not through confrontation, but through competition and credibility. India's rise is not militaristic, imperialistic, or ideological. It is pragmatic, strategic, and inclusive. That makes it even more powerful. It does not seek to overthrow the West, but to rebalance the world, and in doing so, it is ushering in a new geopolitical era, one where the East speaks louder, stands taller, and leads with confidence. India's growth is not only about GDP figures or technological advancement, it is also about reclaiming a cultural identity that was long suppressed, misrepresented, or undervalued on the global stage. For centuries, colonial narratives framed Indian civilization as ancient but stagnant, spiritual but not scientific, diverse but divided. These myths served a purpose. They justified domination. But in 2025, as India rises, it is also rewriting its story proudly, unapologetically, and on its own terms. This cultural reawakening is unsettling for some in the West, not because it is aggressive, but because it is powerful. It challenges the deep-rooted assumption that only Western values and history define modern progress. The resurgence of cultural pride in India is reflected in every sphere, from education to cinema, from literature to diplomacy. Indians are embracing their heritage not as a relic of the past, but as a source of strength for the future. Indigenous knowledge systems, classical languages, spiritual philosophies, and traditional art forms are being revived, respected, and reintegrated into mainstream life. This is not a rejection of modernity, but a fusion, a confident integration of ancient wisdom with modern ambition. When a nation of over 1 billion people reclaims its identity with clarity and conviction, it reshapes not just its internal psyche, but the global perception of power. India's soft power is becoming one of its most effective tools. Through yoga, Ayurveda, cinema, music, food, and even fashion, Indian culture is influencing the world in ways that are subtle but far-reaching. Bollywood has become a global phenomenon. Indian literature is winning international acclaim, and Indian thought leaders are occupying positions of influence in universities, think tanks, and media platforms around the world. The narrative is shifting from exoticism to excellence. The cultural lens through which India was once viewed, often tinted by stereotypes and colonial condescension, is now being replaced by respect and curiosity. This rise in cultural confidence is also visible in how India engages with the world diplomatically. No longer passive or deferential, India speaks with a tone that is rooted in its civilizational values. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. It projects power not through dominance but through dignity. Its approach to global issues, be it climate change, global health, or international conflict, is shaped by a world that sees balance, harmony, and coexistence as strengths, not weaknesses. This stands in contrast to the often confrontational and binary thinking that has long shaped Western foreign policy. The Indian perspective is being heard more, not just because of its economic might, but because of its moral depth. What challenges some in the West is that this cultural resurgence is not seeking validation. India is not looking for approval to be proud of its heritage, it is simply living it. The idea that a non-Western civilization can rise on its own terms, rooted in its own culture, without needing to imitate the West, disrupts the traditional hierarchy of cultural superiority. It raises questions about the universality of Western norms and forces a rethinking of what progress truly means. This is a powerful psychological shift, and power, when reclaimed by the formerly colonized, always evokes fear in the formerly dominant. India's cultural rise is not loud or violent. It is subtle, dignified, and deeply transformative. It is built not on conquest, but on contribution to philosophy, science, medicine, art, and ethics. As India grows economically and strategically, it brings with it the weight of a civilization that has given the world not just numbers and inventions, but ways of thinking, living, and being. This resurgence is not a threat to the world, it is a gift. But to those who have long defined history from one side only, it feels like a storm, not because India is erasing others, but because it is finally remembering itself. The true power of India's rise in 2025 lies not just in its economy, technology, or diplomacy, but in the strength of its people one, 4 billion voices moving with shared determination. This vast population, once viewed as a burden by many economists and foreign observers, is now becoming India's greatest asset. Unlike many Western nations that are facing population decline and aging societies, India is home to the largest youth population in the world. These young minds are not only driving innovation and consumption, but are also shaping a collective national identity rooted in resilience, ambition, and unity. The fear among some in the West stems from the realization that India's demographic dividend is being converted into a strategic advantage. India's unity is not built on uniformity, but on diversity. It thrives through differences in language, religion, ethnicity, and ideology, all managed within the framework of the world's largest democracy. This complex fabric, far from being a weakness, is a living example of coexistence and pluralism. In a time when even the most advanced nations are struggling with polarization and ideological divides, India's ability to function, adapt, and evolve while maintaining democratic values is quietly impressive. That kind of social cohesion on such a massive scale threatens long-standing assumptions that only Western systems can handle complexity effectively. What amplifies India's collective strength is the rise of a confident middle class that is not only growing in numbers but also in self-awareness. This segment of society is better educated, digitally connected, and globally aware. They are shaping political debates, driving economic trends, and creating cultural content that reflects a new Indian voice, one that is neither colonial nor blindly westernized, but rooted in indigenous pride and global vision. These voices are demanding accountability from their leaders, respect from the international community, and space on the world stage. When 1 billion people begin to think, act, and vote with purpose, the world listens, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with concern. India's democratic participation is also becoming a force for global influence. The sheer scale of India's electorate, civic engagement, and policy debates is a testament to the strength of its institutions. In 2025, India is not just exporting goods, it is exporting ideas. Ideas about how to manage a democracy at scale, how to bridge tradition and technology, how to empower the poor without losing momentum in development. These contributions challenge the Western model, which often relies on centralized control and top-down decision-making. India's bottom-up energy, powered by grassroots movements and decentralized governance, offers an alternative model that is resonating across the developing world. Globally, this collective power is being translated into soft and strategic influence. India's diaspora, spread across continents, is increasingly playing leadership roles in business, politics, and academia. They are not just immigrants, they are ambassadors of Indian excellence and values. Their success abroad reinforces the narrative of a rising India at home. It also builds networks of influence that transcend borders and amplify India's voice in every major global discussion. This kind of global presence, when matched with a unified national purpose, creates a force that is difficult to ignore and impossible to contain. What unnerves some in the West is not just the number of Indians, but their shared momentum, a civilization rising in sync. 1 billion people learning, growing, building, innovating, and leading together create a tidal wave of transformation that no policy can stop and no wall can block. India is not rising as a collection of fragmented interests, but as a powerful collective consciousness that believes its time has come. This sense of destiny, unity, and purpose is the silent force behind India's emergence, and for those who have long defined the world's future from their own perspective, it is both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling.